அம்மா தனலட்சுமி மேடமும் உள்ள வர முடியலன்றாங்க. என்ன பிரச்சனைன்னு தெரியல. ஜூம்ல இந்த லிங்க்ல ஏதோ சம் இஷ்யூ இருக்குன்னு நினைக்கிறேன். சாருமே உள்ள வர முடியலன்றாரு.
அப்படின்னா அவங்கள மேனுவலா என்டர் பண்ண சொல்லுங்க, அந்த மீட்டிங் ஐடியையும் பாஸ்வேர்டையும்.
சுரேஷ் போஸ்ட் இஸ் நாட் அலோவிங்னு எல்லாரும் போடுறாங்க. டாக்டர் மனமோகன் வரணும் உள்ள ட்ரை பண்றாரு, அவரை விடாதான். இல்ல சில பேர் நாங்க கூப்பிட்டோம், அப்படி ஒருத்தர் எல்லாம் பண்ண முடியாது. டாக்டர் மனமோகன் வந்து ஒரு ஸ்பீக்கர், he has to come in. இப்ப வர்றவங்க வரைக்கும் விடுங்க. கயல்வெளி வரணும். உங்களுக்கு லிஸ்ட் கொடுத்தனே ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டே ஸ்பீக்கர்ஸ் எல்லாம். முதல்ல டாக்டர் மனமோகன், கயல்வெளி, வாசுகி எல்லாரையும் விடுங்க உள்ள. ஹலோ, சொல்லுங்க. ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணாங்க. டாக்டர் மனமோகன் வரணும், அவர் தான் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்பீக்கர். போஸ்ட் இஸ் நாட் லெட்டிங்னு சொல்றாரு. உங்ககிட்ட நம்பர் எல்லாம் முதல்ல கொடுத்தேன் சுரேஷ்னா.
இல்ல மேபி உங்களுக்கு நம்ம லிமிட்டுக்கு ஒரு 10 பேர் மட்டும் ரிசர்வ் வச்சுட்டு மீதி எல்லாரும் அலோவ் பண்ணுங்களேன்.
அதான்
தட் பி பெட்டர் ஐடியா.
யசோதா வர முடியல,
10 ரிசர்வ் வச்சுங்க. இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் கெஸ்ட் வரும்போது அப்ப அலோவ் பண்ணிக்கலாம்.
லிஸ்ட் கொடுத்தேன் இல்லையா சுரேஷ் உங்ககிட்ட, அதுல இருக்கு இன்னைக்கு பேசுறவங்க அவ்வளவு பேரும் நம்பரும்.
Only 30 people have joined.
எல்லாரும் இல்லைங்க. அட்லீஸ்ட் அந்த நம்பர் உங்களுக்கு கொடுத்த நம்பர்ஸையாவது லெட் பண்ணுங்களேன் ப்ளீஸ். See, it's already 5:15. Jody has to leave by 5:45.
அதான் பெட்டர். டாக்டர் லைன்ல இல்ல, இந்த லிஸ்ட்ல இல்ல, பார்ட்டிசிபென்ட் லிஸ்ட்ல இல்ல, இன்னும் வரல அவர்.
இந்த மாதிரி யூடியூப்லயும் சவுண்ட் கேட்கல அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு இருக்காங்க சுரேஷ் சார். அது என்ன பாத்தீங்களா
சார்? கேக்குது சார். இப்போ யூடியூப்
கேக்குதா இப்ப? ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே.
இல்ல யூடியூப்ல இப்ப சவுண்ட் வருது.
ப்ரோவிசி சாரால ஜாயின் பண்ண முடியல, ஏதோ அது மெயில் ஐடி நிறைய கேக்குது அப்படின்றாரு, இன்வாலிட்னு வருதுன்றாரு. அதுவும் என்னன்னு
ஹலோ, இல்ல நான் இருக்கேனே, நான் இந்த ஜூம்ல இருக்கிறேனே ஸ்ரிஸ்காக்குள்ள, நான் இந்த இருக்கேன். இல்ல இல்ல நான் பேசல, டாக்டர் தான் பேசுறேன். நான் வந்து அவ ஜோடி
சுரேஷ்,
உங்களோட ஒப்போசிஷன்
சுரேஷ்,
லீடர் அறிமுகம் செய்யும்.
சுரேஷ், சுரேஷ், சொல்லுங்க. கயல், கயல், அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து யசோதா, டாக்டர் 3 பேரும் வர முடியாம இருக்காங்க. டாக்டர் இப்பவும் எடுத்தாரு, ட்ரை பண்ணாரா, முடியலையா?
சுரேஷ் சார், ஹலோ.
டைம் போகுது சுரேஷ், we have to start quickly.
சுரேஷ் சார், அம்மா ஒன்றும் இல்லைங்கம்மா, எங்க இவர் ப்ரோவிசி சாரோட மெயில் ஐடி கனெக்ட் ஆகல, அதனால அவரால் உள்ள வர முடியல. சார், சார் சொல்லுங்க.
டாக்டர் நம்பர் அனுப்பியிருக்கேன்
சார். அவரோட ஃபோன் நம்பர்ல மெயில் ஐடி வந்தா ஓகேங்களா சார்?
சுரேஷ், டாக்டர் நம்பர் அனுப்பியிருக்கேன், கொஞ்சம் ட்ரை பண்ணுங்களேன். அவர் வந்தா தொடங்கிடலாம். சுரேஷ், 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 அப்படியா? சரி, இப்ப என்ன பண்ணலாம்? we have to start the meeting at any cost. லேட் ஆயிடுச்சு. can you do a voice?
அவரோட போன்ல
போட்டுருங்க, போட்டு தொடங்கிருங்க. அவருக்கு வந்து யாராவது அசிஸ்ட் பண்ணி பாருங்க என்ன பண்ணுங்க.
போன்ல அவர் போன்ல ட்ரை பண்ண சொல்லு.
சரி சரி,
சுரேஷ் சார், ஒரே ஒரு வேண்டுகோள் சார், உங்களுக்கு அவரோட மெயில் கொஞ்சம் கனெக்ட் பண்ணீங்கன்னா அவர் வர முடியுமா? நீராறும் கடல்
சுரேஷ். சரி ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணு சுரேஷ். நம்ம வந்து ஜோடிக்கு வந்து டைம் ரொம்ப கம்மியா இருக்கு. சுரேஷ் சுரேஷ்
அம்மா வணக்கம். யூடியூப்ல நிகழ்ச்சி தொடங்கிருச்சு, நமக்கு தான் இங்க வரல.
அப்படியா?
ஆமாங்கம்மா, இப்பதாம்மா கேக்குது நமக்கு.
சரி. சுரேஷ் சுரேஷ் ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணலாமா? அப்ப இது acknowledgement சொல்லிட்டுமா சொன்னாலும் தமிழ் தாய் வாழ்த்து போட்டுறீங்களா? இங்க எனக்கு கேட்கவே இல்லை தமிழ் தாய் வாழ்த்து. acknowledgement முதல்ல பண்ணிருக்கணும். இட்ஸ் ஓகே. Let me begin my introduction by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Today, we are celebrating Thirukkural and multiculturalism. May I ask Dr. Parasuraman to give the welcome speech? Dr. Parasuraman, President, International Thirukkural Foundation and Chair of the conference.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandrika. Thank you and vanakkam.
Vanakkam.
Well, we are. I know we are expecting Honorable Miss Yori Mckay, Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism. Dr. B. Balasubramaniam, Pro Vice Chancellor, President of Tamil Perayam, SRM Institute of Science and Technology. Dr. Mano Mohan, Patron, Thirukkural Committee, Tamil Varatsi Mandram. Respected Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, Conference Director and Head of International Thirukkural Foundation, Australia. Brothers and sisters and well-wishers of Thirukkural. I will start my address, a brief address, with a word of gratitude to Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, a respected and dear friend of mine, a well-distinguished personality in the legal profession and a disciple of Thiruvalluvar, for the laudable initiative to organize this online international conference on Thirukkural and multiculturalism. Dr. Chandrika, I congratulate you on being awarded, among other distinctions, the Premier's Harmony Medal winner 2019 with North South Wales State, and the Citizen of the Year 2019. This so clearly shows that you have made outstanding contribution in the land in Australia, and I would therefore like to dedicate Kural verse 397 to you, which states, "The learned make each land their own, in every city find a home, who till they die learn note along what weary ways they roam." More explicitly, it is, how is it that anyone can remain without learning, even to his death, when to the learned man every country is his own country and every town his own town? On behalf of the International Thirukkural Foundation, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all the participants to this online international conference on Thirukkural and multiculturalism. I wish to pay my respect and deep appreciation to Honorable Miss Yori Mckay, MP, Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, for addressing our conference. I salute you, Madam, as a great champion of multiculturalism and for your vision of serving all, as is stated in your inaugural speech of the member for Newcastle in May 2007, I quote, "Living in that community developed my interest in improving the opportunities and the help available to all. Those who work hard, those who suffer setbacks, those who just are not given the same opportunity as others. We know it as social justice. In Gloucester, it was just keeping an eye on friends and neighbors to make sure they were okay," end of quotation. This spirit of all inclusiveness and universality defines the centrality of the Kural. With this vision, Madam, you deserve the recognition as a global ambassador for Thirukkural, and I dedicate Kural 399 to you. I quote, "Finding their source of joy, making for world's joy too, the learned will find their learning a thing of love." With these few words of introduction, I would like to briefly give an update of on the conferences we have organized so far. This very important online conference being organized today is a continuation of major milestones on our journey to take Thirukkural to the world. It followed the national conference in Mauritius in 2016, the international conference in Kanyakumari, Tamil Nadu in 2017, the Liverpool conference 2018, and the international conference on Thirukkural for world peace and harmony in Sydney in 2019, and then followed by the international conference on Thirukkural and world peace and harmony at UNESCO New Delhi in September 2019, and all these being preparation to take UNESCO to the world at UNESCO. And therefore, this conference which you're organizing today is a great opportunity for us to move still further towards achieving this major objective of taking Thirukkural to the world. I would therefore like to once again congratulate Dr. Chandrika for taking this very good initiative and involving so many scholars, so many so many well-wishers of Thirukkural and eminent personalities across the globe to participate in this online conference in the coming 3 days. Well, as we are preparing for that, as we are preparing for our UNESCO meet, let me share with you a piece of good news from this is from the government of Tamil Nadu, that they have taken a very timely and historic decision by the Tamil Nadu government in January 2020 in the Tamil Development and News Department government status number 20 to resolve to invite UNESCO to recognize Thirukkural as a world book. The committee is chaired by Thiru Pandyarajan, Minister for Tamil Official Language and Tamil Culture. And I've been appointed as a member of this committee along with 7 other members. We had a first meeting of this committee last month. More meetings are planned, and I believe this will be a great driver towards going to the global conference we planned at UNESCO. By way of conclusion on my short introductory address, I believe it's important for me to reiterate why we want to take UNESCO, why we want to take Thirukkural to the world through UNESCO. Well, as we all know that the United Nations has rightly proclaimed that we the peoples will save our children from the horror of war. Education for all throughout life is a key word for a new departure. Education for peace and human rights, democracy and tolerance. I think, and UNESCO in its constitution, in the preamble itself, it says, since wars begins in the minds of man, it is in the minds of man that the defenses of peace must be built. And this, I think, is a very important statement which fully reflects that Thirukkural is the right instrument, is a universal scripture which can comfortably accompany UNESCO in this great mission of a culture of peace, especially at this time when we have so many turmoil, tension in the world. So, and this statement is very much implicit in the statement below by the former Director General of UNESCO, Mr. Federico Mayor, who was a great advocate for cultural peace. I'll conclude my statement with a quote from him. He says, "The culture of peace builds on learning, on human rights and democracy are the strongest defenses against conflict. A culture of peace combines this emphasis on education, justice and development with conflict resolution and conflict prevention. Peace," wrote Einstein, "cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. We must understand today that if peace is the right of all people, then a culture of peace is the responsibility of all people." I would like to conclude with this quote from UNESCO and looking forward to taking this conference that we are having today and to the next stage, hopefully next year. We had initially planned the conference at UNESCO in 2020. but because of COVID-19, we have postponed it to next year. And let's hope that with the development in the situation regarding COVID-19, we could plan this conference in 2021 with the full contribution from the state government of Tamil Nadu and also the central government of India, so that we can make it a grand success and realize this great dream we all have to take Thirukkural to the world. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Parasuraman, for your wonderful speech and the encouragement you have given to us to run this program. May I now request Ms. Sri Ponnaya Pillai, Thirukkural Committee Tamil Valarchi Mandram, to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Yori Mckay, MP, Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, who is going to talk to us on Thirukkural and multiculturalism. Sri?
Thank you, Dr. Chandrika.
Thank you.
It is an absolute honor to introduce Honorable Yori Mckay. Yori began her career as a journalist, eventually becoming a news anchor for NBN television. She was among the first Australian news presenters to cover the September 11 attacks in the United States. She later entered the private sector in corporate communications and marketing. Yori also served on the board of Hunter Medical Research Institute, the University of Newcastle Research Associates, and Hunter Manufacturers Association prior to entering politics. Yori is the leader of the opposition in the Parliament of New South Wales since June 2019. She is a member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, representing Strathfield for the Labour Party since 2015, having previously represented Newcastle from 2007 to 2011. Between 2008 and 2011, Yori held a number of junior ministerial responsibilities, including serving as a Minister for Tourism, Small Business, Women, Science and Medical Research, Commerce, and Minister assisting the Minister for Health, Cancer. Yori is a familiar person within the subcontinent Australian community. It is hard not to miss Yori at any community event, dressed beautifully in a sari. I remember reading an article from Sydney Morning Herald after Yori became an opposition leader, where she said what kind of person she is. Yes, I found the issue, which was the July 19, 2019, where Yori says, quote, "Boldness is a word I attach to myself all the time," unquote. Chapter 39, verse 383 in Thirukkural says, vigilance, erudition, and boldness. These are the three never abandon a competent ruler. In Tamil, Thoongamai, Kalvi Thunivudamai, Ammundrum, Ninga Nilanalpavatku. Please welcome Yori Mckay to deliver the keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sris. I appreciate those very kind comments. Vanakkam, everyone. And let me start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to our elders past and present here in Sydney. I'm coming to you tonight from Parliament House in Macquarie Street in Sydney. And I want to say thank you very much for the kind invitation to join you tonight. Before I begin, I do want to acknowledge some of our very special people who are on the conference tonight, including Professor and Dr. Amagun Parasuraman, President of the International Thirukkural Foundation Mauritius, Dr. Bala Subramaniam, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, Australian Head of the International Thirukkural Foundation Mauritius and founder Tamil Valarchi Mandram, and a very good friend of mine, Dr. Manimohan, of course, another good friend of mine, patron of the Thirukkural Committee, Tamil Valarchi Mandram, Sris, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Sris, of course, is with the Thirukkural Committee, Tamil Valachi Munram, and I also want to then acknowledge all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank very much the International Thirukkural Foundation of Mauritius, Tamil Valachi Munram, and SRM Institute of Science and Technology for the kind invitation to be with you this evening. Who would have thought that I would actually be coming to you tonight over Zoom? But of course, we live in extraordinary times, and I'm so pleased that despite the COVID pandemic that we're all living through, that I can actually be with you over Zoom. I think it's an honour for me, can I say, to be speaking at this conference with you tonight, a conference that celebrates one of the oldest surviving classical languages in the world. As you all know, and as I know as Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, the Tamil language has influenced almost every corner of the globe and has definitely helped shape how we understand and, of course, describe the world today. As many of you know, I am a very good friend of the Tamil Australian community, and I am a very strong advocate for issues important to you all. Our state of New South Wales is, of course, home to a very significant Tamil Australian community, and many of whom I am privileged to represent in my electorate of Strathfield. Our Tamil Australian community has had a profound influence in shaping both the economy and the community of New South Wales, and I see that as Leader of the Opposition and in my role as Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism. We only need look at the areas of hospitality, the arts, politics, medicine, business, academia. Our Tamil Australian community is very much present in all those areas. But what I have learned about our Tamil Australian community in representing being a Member of Parliament in New South Wales is the very strong desire to preserve the Tamil heritage, culture, and most importantly, language. Through your advocacy here in New South Wales, of course, the Tamil language is now included in the higher school certificate syllabus. And I love very, very much that there is a focus from the community, like no other community in New South Wales, about teaching the younger generations about the importance of language and literature. And as all of you know, I attend every single cultural event for our Tamil Australian community that I can. My electorate, as many of you know, is home to the Homebush Tamil Study Centre, and every Saturday, and I visit there often, there are children there learning the Tamil language, studying Tamil literature like Thirukkural, and celebrating Tamil culture. The Tamil language, as we all know, has a very rich literary history with many classical works that is still relevant and widely discussed, including Thirukkural. This is not my first time actually speaking about the Thirukkural and its impact on society at large. Last year, after your first conference here in Sydney, I had the privilege of speaking about the Thirukkural and Thiruvulava at the New South Wales Parliament in the Legislative Assembly. And I do encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to read my speech, which is now forever in the Hansard of the oldest parliament in Australia. Thirukkural is one of the oldest poetic works in Tamil literature, composed by scholar, poet and philosopher Thiruvulava. As the Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, I think all of you can take credit from the fact that I know about Thirukkural. It is something I have heard over many years, spoken at many of the events that I have been at. And it is why when Chandrika asked me to come on and speak to you tonight, I was so pleased to do so. Thirukkural was composed some 2,000 years ago, yet it still remains a sacred and relevant text to millions of Tamils throughout the world and here in Sydney, Australia. I am so impressed that it is this text that brings you all together tonight from all corners of the globe in what is a very difficult situation for so many people. There is a universal message in how a conscious and spiritual individual life can lead to a moral and ethical life that strives towards peace and harmony. Venerable Kalkunde Dharmanunda, who attended the 2019 International Thirukkural Conference on Peace and Harmony through Literature in Sydney, he once stated, "Thirukkural is a recital about life. It's a guide to develop one's mind with the aim of making an individual a better human being who understands and loves others. Such an individual will naturally influence others in a positive way for them to be better individuals." It is then important to acknowledge that the Thirukkural is widely known as a universal literature. I think that it is this universality, this concept of universality, that has allowed the Thirukkural to transcend national boundaries, races, religions, and languages, and remain as applicable in today's modern and very multicultural world, particularly here in Australia. Of course, there are very few places in the world where multiculturalism is embraced and celebrated as it is in Australia. It is therefore so very appropriate that this conference is being hosted by the Australian chapter of the International Thirukkural Foundation. 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us, but particularly here in New South Wales. For those of you who don't know, we've experienced a very severe drought, followed by bushfires, then floods, followed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course now a recession. And that is just 2020. When I think about the Thirukkural and its relevance to today's modern world, there are two couplets that at this time stand out for me. In couplet 72 in part 1, chapter 8, Thiruvulava elucidates, "The loveless grab all for themselves, the loving give even their bones." During this pandemic, we have seen great care, respect, generosity, and empathy in the wider community. Thiruvulava broadly uses the term love to encompass kindness and compassion, traits which have been shown by our community, our many community groups and workers across the spectrum here in New South Wales, who've worked tirelessly to support others, often at their own expense. And tonight, I want to give special mention to our many Tamil Australian organisations in New South Wales who've worked around the clock to provide grocery hampers to some of the most vulnerable members of our community, including those in Australia on a temporary visa and our international students who were left out of official support. Our Tamil Australian community feels very strongly and is incredibly generous with their giving and with their time. And I reflect on that tonight. In couplet 140 in part 1, chapter 14, Thiruvulava states, "Who cannot live in harmony with the world? Though learned are fools indeed. Those who cannot live in harmony with the world are fools, regardless of how educated they are." Thiruvulava asserts that in order to live in harmony, one must have a vision of a fairer, more tolerant society. We must accept those around us, regardless of race, religion, or social status. And it is this that I reflect on in my role as a Member of Parliament. I know that this also has very special significance to our Tamil community, who now have a safe and tolerant place here in Australia to call home. Today, thanks to all of you, I am reminded of the importance of celebrating texts like Thirukkural and scholars like Thiruvulava. Conferences like this pass on knowledge to future generations and therefore ensure that concepts of peace, harmony, and reconciliation are practiced each and every day. And also that members of Parliament like me, as Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism and as Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the Labor Party here in New South Wales, are reminded of the universality of this great literature. I thank the International Thirukkural Foundation, Tamil Valachi Manram, and SRM Institute of Science and Technology for your work in promoting peace and harmony through literature. And I do want to wish all of you the very best for the conference. And thank you for the great privilege of joining you this evening from New South Wales Parliament House.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yori Mckay, for your wonderful speech with an in-depth reading of Thirukkural, which really impressed me. Thank you very much once again. I know that you're very busy and you may be excused now from leaving this, from attending this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandrika, and a good conference to everyone. Cheerio.
Thank you. May I now request Dr. Jay Ganesh to read the inaugural speech of Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, Pro-Chancellor, SRM Institute of Science and Technology and President of Tamil Peraya.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். எங்களது SRM பல்கலைக்கழகத்தின் இணை துணைவேந்தரும் SRM தமிழ் பேராயத்தின் தலைவருமாகிய பேராசிரியர் முனைவர் இர பாலசுப்ரமணியன் ஐயா அவர்களின் தொடக்க உரையை நான் தற்போது இங்கே வாசிக்கிறேன். உலக நாகரிகங்களுள் தொன்மை நாகரிகத்தையும் உலக மொழிகளுள் தொன்மை தன்மையையும் கொண்டதாக தமிழ்ச் சமூகமும் தமிழும் திகழ்ந்து வருகிறது. இத்தகைய பெருமைமிக்க மொழியில் பெருமைமிக்க நூலாக இன்றளவும் திகழ்கிறது திருவள்ளுவர் இயற்றிய திருக்குறள். 1.25 அடியில் உலகையே தன் கருத்துக்களால் அளந்த பெருமை திருவள்ளுவரையே சாரும். இத்தகைய சிறப்பு வாய்ந்த திருக்குறளின் சிறப்பினையும் பெருமையினையும் பல்வேறு நிலைகளில் எடுத்துரைக்கும் விதமாக பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் அமைப்பும் மொரிஷியஸ் SRM தமிழ் பேராயமும் இணைந்து உலகளாவிய நிலையில் திருக்குறள் பல்லின கலாச்சாரம் 2020 என்னும் தலைப்பிலான இந்த மாநாட்டை ஒருங்கிணைத்துள்ளது. 2019 ஆண்டு திருக்குறள் சொல்லும் அமைதியும் நல்லிலக்கணமும் குறித்த சிந்தனைகளை ஆஸ்திரேலியாவின் சிட்னியில் நடைபெற்ற திருக்குறள் மாநாடு எடுத்துரைத்தது போல 2020 இணையம் வழி நடைபெறும் இந்த பன்னாட்டு கருத்தரங்கம் திருக்குறள் பன்முக கலாச்சாரத்தை எவ்வாறு பறைசாற்றுகிறது என்பதை வலியுறுத்தி நிற்கிறது. உலக பொதுமறை என்று சொல்லப்படும் திருக்குறளின் சிந்தனைகள் உலகத்தில் வாழும் அனைத்து மனிதர்களுக்கானது என்னும் சீரிய நோக்கத்தினை மீண்டும் ஒரு முறை எடுத்துரைக்கவே இந்த பன்னாட்டு கருத்தரங்கம் நடைபெறுகிறது. உலகளாவிய நிலையில் பல்வேறு அறிஞர் பெருமக்கள் உரை வழங்க உள்ள இந்த கருத்தரங்கில் உலகளாவிய நிலையில் 1000க்கும் மேற்பட்டோர் பங்கேற்பது எனக்கு பெருமகிழ்ச்சி. எங்கள் மதிப்பிற்குரிய பெரம்பலூர் பாராளுமன்ற உறுப்பினரும் SRM கல்வி குழுமத்தின் நிறுவன வேந்தருமாகிய மாண்பமை பாரிவேந்தர் ஐயா அவர்களால் 5ஆம் தமிழ்ச்சங்கமாக உருவாக்கப்பட்ட தமிழ் பேராயம் உலகளாவிய நிலையில் பல சிறப்பான செயல்பாடுகளை முன்னெடுத்து வருகிறது. அதில் இந்த பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் மாநாட்டை மொரிஷியஸ் பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் அமைப்புடன் இணைந்து நடத்துவது பெருமகிழ்ச்சியை தருகிறது. இதற்கு காரணமாக இருந்த முனைவர் சந்திரிகா சுப்பிரமணியன் அவர்களுக்கு இந்த நேரத்தில் எனது வாழ்த்துக்களையும் பாராட்டுகளையும் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். எதிர்வரும் காலங்களில் தொடர்ந்து இது போன்று உலகளாவிய திருக்குறள் மாநாடுகளை நடத்தவும் SRM தமிழ் பேராயம் துணை நிற்கும். இந்த கருத்தரங்கம் சிறக்க SRM தமிழ் பேராயத்தின் தலைவர் என்ற முறையில் எனது நெஞ்சார்ந்த வாழ்த்துக்களை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். கற்க கசடர கற்பவை கற்றபின் நிற்க அதற்கு தக என்னும் வள்ளுவரின் திருக்குறளை கூறி எனது உரையை நிறைவு செய்கிறேன். நன்றி, வணக்கம். மதிப்பிற்குரிய இணை துணைவேந்தர் அவர்களின் இந்த உரையை இவ்வளவு நேரம் கேட்ட அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றி.
நன்றி Ganesh. May I now request Dr. John Samuel, Chair of Institute of Asian Studies, Chennai, to deliver his speech. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us.
Dear Dr. Chandrika Subramanian, the organizer of this conference, friends and scholars, ladies and gentlemen. The topic Thirukkural and multiculturalism is a very much interesting and it invites the following areas for its analysis. The one, the socio-political milieu of Thirukkural. the different socio-cultural and ethnic groups in the period of Thirukkural. The audience of Thirukkural, when it was composed, how the issues pertaining to multiculturalism are tackled and addressed in Thirukkural, and finally, the Tamil identity in Thirukkural. Thirukkural flourished in a new era in the annals of the early Tamils, namely the age of ethical life, which was completely against the heroic and post-heroic ages, which were the era of horrible wars waged for the purpose of expanding the territories of the kings and warlike chieftains. The Tamil heroic poems, like their counterparts in other parts of the globe, elogize the militant prowess of their heroes, their military exploits, ability to loot the wealth of the neighboring kings, the cruel act of killing their warriors, bringing their women as war captives, destroying their cities and all their resources. They celebrated the sharing of the looted wealth among the warriors, the luxurious court feasts, the immoral sexual life of the kings and the warriors, and the pomp and lavish life of the courtiers. Thirukkural provided an alternate lifestyle for war-loving materialistic ancient Tamil society by replacing the old values by new values, tinged with morality. Here, the war is replaced by peace. Life of calamities and chaos are replaced by the life in harmony with symbiotic and mutual love. This was well received by the Tamil society, which was already in a transitional stage, a transition from the heroic age to an age of ethical literature. During the period of Thirukkural, there was a very big transformation in the social structures of Tamil Nadu. This is mainly owing to the flourishing of the trade, both inland and with neighboring countries. This resulted in the upsurge of an affluent trading community and their hegemony in the Tamil social structure. The trading community known as Vanigar has become the main source of wealth in Tamil Nadu. It was able to take up projects of very big magnitude in Tamil Nadu with the collaboration of the kings who had become very weak financially owing to frequent wars. The trading community was able to build up 4 port cities, namely Pumbuhar in the Chola territory, Korkai in the Pandian region, Musri and Tondi in the Chera territory, and subsequently Mamallapuram in Tondai Nadu. The ruling aristocracy was holding only political powers without adequate financial resources. The wealth of the land was under the control of the traders, who did not need either battles or martial heroism for accumulating wealth. It is obvious that Thirukkural might have been composed in an era when trade flourished between Tamil Nadu and the countries of the Southeast Asia, South Asia, Central Asia, and the Western countries, chiefly Rome. The Tamil society was in a transitional period. Thiruvallur lived 100 or 200 years after the Kaniyan who declared with great pride that every country is my country and every man my kinsman. Yadum ure yavarum keli. It was more or less in the same period that the Greek and Roman philosophers, including Zeno, described the whole universe as a single family. One of the earliest civilizations that made a deep impact on early Tamil society was the Roman civilization, and we have large number of evidences in Sangam literature for the close commercial contacts between Rome and Tamil Nadu. The sea route to Tamil Nadu from Rome was popularly known as the spice route. and the Roman ships reached via Alexandria to the shores of ancient Tamil Nadu, which also include
சார் மைக் மியூட் பண்ணுங்க, யாரோ உள்ள பேசிட்டு இருக்கீங்க, கேக்குது வெளியில, சாருக்கு டிஸ்டர்ப் ஆகுது.
Tamil Nadu, which also included the present Kerala. The word Yavana from Ionia is used to refer to the Greeks in the North Indian literatures, and in Tamil it is used to refer to the Romans and gradually to the Syrians, and it has been an umbrella term to include all foreigners. Purananuru and Mullaipattu, Pattinapalai and Silappadigaram provide ample references to trade with Rome and other countries, and the excavation at Arikamedu by Mortimer Wheeler established beyond doubt about Roman settlements in Tamil Nadu. Silappadigaram also speaks about people from various countries along with the traders of other states staying permanently in Pumbuhar. They are showing clearly the abundant foreign settlements in Tamil Nadu. It has been made clear by many scholars that early Roman writers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and Athenian philosophers like Zeno have left a strong impact on the ancient Tamil ethos. In addition to Western countries, the early Tamils had commercial contact with South Asian countries, East Asian countries, and Southeast Asian countries. Their trade with Palestine, Babylon, and other countries of the Middle East has been well established with objective evidence. Large number of Tamil words have been identified in Hebrew, Latin, Chinese, Japanese, and other languages. Linguists have established a close genetic relationship between early Tamil and the languages of the Semitic, Sumerian, Scythian, Ural-Altaic, and a number of other language families of the world. This shows clearly that Tamil Nadu during the period of Thirukkural has become a multicultural land with ethnic pluralism or a mixed ethnic community, a cultural mosaic. The other ethnic and linguistic groups form a minority, the vast majority being Tamils. It was completely a land of multiculturalism where people migrated from various countries and various provinces of India, lived in cultural, linguistic, and even religious minorities speaking various North Indian languages. It is obvious that Thirukkural was not written only for the Tamils. It was written to a wider readers, which include all the cultural groups lived in Tamil Nadu who can understand the Tamil language. That may be one of the reasons that the author has avoided the cultural or regional or ethnic peculiarities peculiar to the Tamils. He is very particular to make this book a common ethical work, and he wanted to be broader in his social and religious outlook. Even when referring to gods, he avoids deities peculiar to any particular sex. Moral values are given more priority than deities. Moral heroism is appreciated. Kings are portrayed as simple and modest. It is completely addressed to a universal man. Humanitarianism is given more important than gods. He is cursing even the creator if he creates a person thrown to utter poverty and misery. The tactics followed by Thirukkural to overcome the issues of multiculturalism is to deal with general human nature. The book takes up only basic human nature, which are common to the entire humanity and for all ages, irrespective of linguistic, cultural, and other affinities. a good husband, an ideal wife, ideal children, ideal king, efficient in governance, ascetics, good in mental makeup, ideal warriors, ministers who are good counselors are the characters in Thirukkural. There is no individuals in Kural, and all characters are types, not individual, they are types representing different ideals. The Tamil Superman is a Sandon, is an embodiment of 5 noble qualities, namely Anbu, love, Vaimai, truth, non-blame, Opuravu, reconciliation, and Kannottam, good judgment. Whatever is acceptable to such a noble person, namely Sandon, is virtue. Whatever is not acceptable to him are against virtue. The protagonist of Thirukkural, he is the touchstone for all the virtues. Thus, by portraying the ideal general human nature through various types, Thirukkural is able to transcend the narrow-minded parochialism and raise itself to the level of world literature by a poet of general human nature. The treatment of common general human nature, free from changing local peculiarities and multicultural issues, endows this literature with more permanent value. The Tamil identity is very important. By dealing with common general human nature, the poet need not sacrifice his ethnic or cultural identity. The 250 poems treating of man-human relationship in the third part of Kural in the Tamil Agathinai pattern gives the Tamil identity to Thirukkural. It is curious to recall that another work for the word Aham is Tamil. So these two words are synonymous. Aham is Tamil. The inclusion of the songs of Solomon, the peculiar love songs of the Jewish people, gives Jewish identity to the Holy Bible. Similarly, the love songs with the theme Kalaviyal, that is clandestine love, and Karpiyal, post-marital love, under Agathinai tradition in Kamathupal, gives Tamil identity to this world literature. Thus, Thirukkural is a world literature blossomed in the Tamil soil, crossing the barriers of all multicultural peculiarities, ethnic varieties, and religious pluralism. With these words, I declare open the group discussion, Thirukkural and multiculturalism. Thank you.
Chandrika, unmute here.
Chandrika, you need to unmute.
May I now request Ms. Durga Avan to chair the discussion on Thirukkural and multiculturalism and invite Mrs. Kayalvili Rajashekar, Mrs. Vasugi Sitrasenan, and Mrs. Yasoda Ponnuthurai to join to discuss about what do we achieve by multiculturalism in Thirukkural. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrika Subramanian. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we meet in and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I am very, very pleased that once again this year that the Australian chapter of the International Thirukkural Festival and the committee has taken on the hosting responsibilities of the Thirukkural conference this year. I am here not as an academic at a university or as a lawyer, but today and for the next few days, I'm here as a mere child student of the Thirukkural. It is the greatest honor to be a participant of this conference among so many of you who are academics and scholars of this universal literature. I'd like to specifically acknowledge Dr. Parasuraman, the chairperson of the International Thirukkural Foundation, who has worked tirelessly to bring this text, its universality and its importance to the world stage through his partnership with the United Nations and many, many wonderful scholars and academics and politicians throughout the world. I'd like to also acknowledge Dr. Chandrika Subramanian, who has been the champion of this conference, not just last year, but this year also. If many of you are joining us for the first time at this conference, last year, the University of Sydney hosted this conference along with Tamil Valachimandram, organized by the founder of Tamil Valachimandram, Dr. Chandrika Subramanian. And it was a great pleasure to have so many scholars from across the world join us and impart their knowledge about the Thirukkural. I'd like to thank you, Chandrika, for spearheading this, even at this very difficult time of a global pandemic. More than ever, this is the time we need the Thirukkural. This is the time we need the knowledge and the understanding and the self-reflection and the community together. I'd like to also acknowledge Dr. Bala Subramaniam, Dr. Jason, and of course, Dr. John Samuel, whose wonderful speech really brought in a lot of the aspects of the Thirukkural today. Yori Mckay MP, the leader of the opposition of the Labor Party in New South Wales, and the Labor Party in itself, has been a great support of the Tamil people and this conference last year and this year. We also look forward to hearing from Dr. Hugh McDermott MP at the conclusion of this conference. So why are we here? We're here because 133 chapters, 1,330 couplets of 7 words coming together in 3 books about virtue, wealth, and love is bringing together generations, bringing together centuries of knowledge, transcending time, transcending race, ethnicity, religion, to teach us how to live life, a private life through self, family, and friends, but also a public life in politics, law, economics, philosophy, the administration of justice, and social harmony. Humanism is at the heart of the Thirukkural's message. Peace echoes all through it. And what I love so much about it is how it speaks so much about equality. It bridges gender gaps and barriers. And it comes from a time when gender equality wasn't something that was spoken of. If you and I could reflect into even the recent history of maybe even 20 or 50 years ago, gender equality was still a very new concept for a lot of the legal world and a lot of the political world. And even now, today, we have women struggling to find equality in their homes, their workplaces, and in society. But Thiruvalluvar was ahead of his time. And that is why his words that transcend all these racial, ethnic, and religious divides bring to us this concept of equality, which feeds into multiculturalism. I'd like to bring to you Kural 972, which states, all human beings are equal by birth, but distinctions arise only because of the different qualities of their action. It is a very important time in the world at the moment for us to reflect on this. And that is why this whole message of multiculturalism is one that we need to hear from now. Right now, I'd like to introduce to you Councillor Yasso Ponnuturai. Yasso is a councillor for the Labor Party representing the city of Canning in Western Australia. She is an exponent of the Veena and Carnatic music. She also is a champion of multiculturalism, women's rights, and spearheading multicultural values, as well as encouraging young women of colour into politics and leadership positions. She is somebody that this stage of this conference should be proud to welcome. And Yaso today is also joined by Kayalvili Rajasekharan. Kyle is a solicitor, as we call lawyers here in Australia, from South Australia. She has championed Tamil by being the founder of Muttamil Palli, which is a Tamil school. As a teacher and a scholar of Tamil, she also is studying Aboriginal studies in her master's. Her special interest is Aboriginal studies and Tamil. Being Australian Tamil, this is very close to my heart. We are very, very fortunate to have Kayalvili Rajasekharan join us also. Next on the panel, we have a doctor, a medical practitioner specializing in emergency medicine is Dr. Vasagi Sithirasenan. I hope I said it right, Dr. Vasagi. She is an ambassador of peace. She's also the president of the Queensland Tamil Mandram. And the Queensland Tamil Mandram has worked very hard for decades to teach Tamil children the values, the culture, and the language that we all celebrate here today. So welcome to all three ladies. I will start by asking Councillor Yaso Ponuthure to share a few words. And after Yaso speaks, then I will speak to Yaso and ask her a few questions that may be of use to her. If you have any questions and you'd like to share, please leave those questions under your YouTube comments and I'll be able to share them and ask our panelists those questions. So off to you, Yaso. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to again acknowledge the traditional owners of this our country, beautiful Aboriginal land, and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. எல்லோருக்கும் இனிய மாலை வணக்கங்கள். எல்லோருக்கும் எனது நன்றியும் விசேஷமா எனது நன்றி டாக்டர் சந்திரிகாக்கு. ஏனென்றால் இந்த திருக்குறள் மாநாட்டை இந்த பேண்டமிக் டைம்லயுமே ஒரு சவாலாக எடுத்து ஆன்லைன்ல எல்லாரும் வேறு நாடுகளிலும் ஈவன் இப்ப ஆஸ்திரேலியாவில நாங்களும் வேற நேரத்திலும் இருக்கின்றோம். அப்படி இருந்தும் அதை ஆன்லைன் மூலமாக இந்த டெக்னாலஜி மூலமாக எங்களை தொடர்பு கொண்டு இதை நடத்துவதற்கு உங்களுக்கு நன்றியும் பெருமையும் சந்திரிகா. The few things I have taken is, of course, as Durga said, I also work in a bit of a politics area and championing for women, especially women of colors, where we can become leaders, and in politics or in boards or where we make changes. And I read something, I'm going to speak in Tamil and English. Aran valley uruttal. Aran அதை பற்றி படிக்கும்போது தனக்கும் பிறருக்கும் நன்மை பயக்கும் எல்லா செயல்களும் அறம் என்பதாகும். மனதில் குற்றம் இல்லாமல் இருப்பதே அறம். பிறர் மேன்மையில் பொறாமை, புலன்கள் போகும் வழி செல்லும் ஆசை, இவை தடைபட்டால் வரும் சீற்றம், கோபத்தில் பிறக்கும் கடுஞ்சொல், இந்த நான்கையும் நீக்கி தொடர்ந்து நடப்பதே அறம். மற்றவர் மனம் வருந்தாமல் இனிமையாய் பணிவாய் பேசுதல், முகத்தில் இனிமையை தேர்க்குதல், நல்ல வழியில் நடந்து மற்றவருக்கு எடுத்துக்காட்டாக வாழ்வது, எல்லா வழியிலும் தேவைக்கேற்ப மற்றவருக்கு முடிந்த அளவு உதவுவது, இவை எல்லாமே அறமே. சிறப்பு ஈனும் செல்வமும் ஈனும் அறத்தினும் ஊங்கு ஆக்கம் எவனோ உயிர்க்கு. அறம் ஒரு மனிதனுக்கு சிறப்பையும் தரும் செல்வத்தையும் தரும் பெருமை கொண்டது. இதை விட ஒரு மனிதனுக்கு மேன்மையானது ஏதும் உண்டா? Virtue yields distinction as well as prosperity. What gain greater can a virtue can man obtain than this? And why this is important is our culture, Tamil culture, we are very proud to say we are all Tamils and how our cultures brought us up. But how we interact with other communities is very important. How we are able to listen and then react accordingly. So that is why this is talking about the நோக்க இனிமை பெருக்குதல், நல்ல வழியில் நடந்து மற்றவருக்கு எடுத்துக்காட்டாக வாழ்வது. நாங்கள் எல்லோரும் கடல் கடந்து ஆஸ்திரேலியா எங்கள் நாடு எங்கள் ஊராக நினைத்து வந்திருக்கின்றோம். அப்படியான நிலைமையில் இப்படியான ஒரு நல்ல வேல்யூஸ் இருந்தால்தான் நாங்களும் இந்த சமுதாயத்தில் நல்ல மனிதர்களாக வாழ முடியும் என்றால் எனது நம்பிக்கை. ஒல்லும் வகையான் அறவினை ஓவாதே செல்லும் பாய் எல்லாம் செயல். செல்லும் எல்லா இடத்திலும் முடியும் வரை தன் ஆற்றலுக்கேற்ப அறச்செயல்களை செய்ய வேண்டும் என்று திருவள்ளுவர் வலியுறுத்துகிறார். மற்றவருக்கு நன்மை தரும் வகையில் உதவுவதை ஒவ்வொருவரும் தன் கடமையாக கொள்ளுதல் நல்லது. அடுத்ததாக முக்கியமாக நான் இதை பேச வேண்டிய விஷயம் இங்கே வந்தால் ஒழுக்கமுடைமை. 14வது ஒழுக்கமுடைமை. நல்ல நடத்த உடையவராக இருப்பது முக்கியமான விஷயம். ஒழுக்கம் விழுப்பம் தரலான் ஒழுக்கம் உயிரினும் ஒன்பப்படும். இது இந்த திருக்குறளை ஒட்டி இந்த 14 பாடலை ஒட்டி சஞ்சய் சுப்பிரமணியம் குந்தலவராளி ஆற்றில் இந்த ஒழுக்கம் விழுப்பம் தரது பற்றி நல்ல ஒரு கீர்த்தனையை அமைஞ்சிருக்கின்ற திருவள்ளுவர். அது ஒழுக்கமாக வாழ்வது ஒருவருக்கு மேன்மையை தரும். அதனால்தான் உயிரை விட சிறந்ததாய் போற்றப்பட வேண்டும் என்கிறார் திருவள்ளுவர். ஒழுக்கமாக வாழ்பவரை மற்றவர் போற்றுவர், அவர் சொல்வதை மற்றவர் ஏற்றுக்கொள்வர், மதிப்பர், உண்மையாக நேர்மையாக நடக்க வேண்டும், வாழ்க்கை வழிகாட்டியாகவும் ஏற்றுக்கொள்வர். So propriety of a conduct leads to eminence. Therefore, it should be preserved more carefully than life. One who practices it becomes others' leader, role model, and guidance. And why that is important? Because we are trying to live in a beautiful multicultural country. Australia has accepted all of us, and they let us cherish our cultural values. So in that aspect, we also need to be careful how disciplined we live and we become an example to other people. உலகத்தோடு ஒட்ட ஒழுகல் பல கற்றும் கல்லார் அறிவிலாதார். I think this is very appropriate திருக்குறள். உலகத்தோடு ஒட்ட ஒழுகல் பல கற்றும் கல்லார் அறிவிலாதார். உலக மக்களோடு ஒன்றாக இணைந்து பொருந்து வாழ கற்றுக்கொண்டவரே அறிவானவராக கருதப்படுகிறார். கல்வி அதையும் கற்றிருந்தாலும் இந்த பண்பு இல்லை என்றால் அவரை அறிவில்லாதவர் என்றே ஆவர். So those who are able to adapt, agreeable to the world, tolerate and live harmony with others and considered as wise and someone who has really learned it. So this is very important for us to live day-to-day life as in the neighborhood, in a society, or whether we live in any workplace or whether in parliament or councils or where we make decisions and we make changes. And the last one I'm going to talk is இனியவை கூறல். இன்சொல்லால் ஈரம் அலை இப்படிரு இலவாம் செம்பொருள் கண்டவராய் சொல். ஒருவர் வாயிலிருந்து வரும் சொற்கள் ஈரம் கொண்டதாய் இனிமை கலந்ததாய் வஞ்சனை இல்லாமல் உன் நோக்கம் இல்லாது உண்மை கொண்டதாய் இருப்பதே ஆகும். அல்லவை தேய அறம் பெருகும் நல்லவை நாடி இனிய சொல்லின். நல்லவற்றை ஆராய்ந்து அவற்றை மற்றவர் விரும்பும் வகையில் சொல்வது சிறப்பெத்தரம். This is how we need to exchange the good ideas in our community across the world, across the country, across the society. So that's why we believe in multiculturalism, in revitalizing town and city centers and the nation. So these are very important. And not the last but the least is Virundombal. Exercising our hospitality is emphasized as an important component in one's life. Giving and sharing for those in needs should be our social responsibility. I strongly believe in social responsibility. This will assures by giving to others, we won't lose our wealth. Instead, we will gain and earn in other ways. So additionally, in multicultural society with migrants, hospitality helps to build a strong, powerful, positive community through helping, sharing, connecting, and empowering others. It does not confine with just providing food, but understanding one's need and help to provide whatever help is possible at the moment. So this pandemic time or even as usual life. So with that, I will stop talking, and I'm eager to listen from others. And as I said, I'm not an expert in the Thirukkural, but I pick up few of them which suits and how it can make me a better person to live in my society to lead others too. Nandri, vanakkam.
Thank you, Councillor Yasso, for your wonderful speech. As a politician and the only Tamil councillor in Australia, we want to ask you about how the Thirukkural helps you in your political life and how important do you think it is for us to share it with people of other cultures and other races?
As I said, this particular one, Olukkamudame, is very important because in our life, every day is very challenging. It's not just attending meetings and events and listening to people, but how do we carry ourselves? So on the Olukkamudame, discipline is very important. And the other one, of course, the the education, the knowledge is very powerful. So it's just not the money. The knowledge is very powerful, and we do need a good knowledge. So this is where the Thirukkural helps me. Whenever I have my own downtime, I look at just one of the Thirukkural and see, okay, how else I can change my life. And as you know, you are also in politics, Durga, and I'm very proud to see another Tamil woman in Australia who's an upcoming politician. And so these will sort of boost our self-esteem. So that is where Thirukkural is very important. And I encourage all Tamil parents to ask their children to read at least one or two and pick up the ones you like the best. Yes. Thank you.
You said in your biography that you came to love the Thirukkural and Tamil literature through your love of music and Carnatic music. இசையால் உங்களுக்கு இந்த ஆர்வம் வந்திருக்கின்றது. So அதை பற்றி கொஞ்சம் தமிழில் கூற முடியுமா? யூடியூபில் பார்த்து கொண்டிருக்கிறவர்கள் நீங்கள் தமிழ் பேசுவதை ரசிக்கிறார்கள். So தமிழ்லையும் கொஞ்சம் சொல்லாமே.
இசையால் இணைவோம் இனிதே நாமே என்று கூறித்தான் நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய ஒரு இசை குழுவை கூட நான் இங்க பெர்த்தில் சேர்த்து வைத்திருக்கின்றேன். நான் சின்ன வயதிலிருந்து யாழ்ப்பாணத்தில் சங்கீதம் கற்றேன். அதற்கு அப்புறம் வீணை கற்றிருக்கின்றேன். நான் இப்பவும் நான் வீணை ஸ்ரீனிவாசன் ஹைதராபாத்ல அவரிடம் வீணை கற்றுக்கொண்டிருக்கின்றேன். நானும் படிப்பித்து கொடுக்கின்றேன் வீணை. பட் இசை தமிழ் மூலம் இப்ப வந்து எல்லாருக்கும் சின்ன பிள்ளைகளுக்கு தமிழை வந்து இந்த லிட்ரேச்சர் இத முக்கியமாக இசை அந்த இலக்கணம் எல்லாம் கற்பிக்கிறது கஷ்டமா இருக்கலாம், சில சொற்கள் கஷ்டமா இருக்கலாம். ஆனால் அந்த இசை மூலம் கற்பிக்கும் போது அவர்கள் ஒரு ஆர்வமாக அதை பயில்வார்கள். அதுதான் என்னுடைய நோக்கம். நான் அதை கண்கூடாகவும் கண்டிருக்கின்றேன். தமிழுக்கு அமுது ரொம்ப ரொம்ப சின்ன 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 கிருத்திஸ் பாட்டுகள், பாரதியார் சரி, எத்தனையோ மகா கவிஞர்கள் தமிழில் பாடல்கள் இருக்கின்றார்கள். அந்த பாடல்களை அவர்களுக்கு சொல்லிக் கொடுக்கும் போது அவர்கள் ஆசையா அவருக்கு actually they wouldn't know they actually learning a Tamil language. And so one of my next challenge to Dr. Chandrika is, which I will be asking, நாங்கள் வந்து இங்க நெய்வேலி சந்தான கோபாலன் அவர்கள் மூலமாக ஆஸ்திரேலியா பற்றி ஒரு தேசிய கீதமே எழுதியிருக்கின்றோம் தமிழில். அதை நான் பல தடவை இங்க பெர்த்தில் வெஸ்டர்ன் ஆஸ்திரேலியா நாங்கள் மேடையேற்றி இருக்கின்றோம். அதை வந்து நாங்கள் தமிழ் தேசிய கீதமாக இந்த ஆஸ்திரேலியா கண்டிப்பாக எப்படியாவது அடுத்த முறை ஆஸ்திரேலியா டேக்கு நாங்கள் அதை பாட வேண்டும். ஆஸ்திரேலியா மக்கள் எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து அந்த தமிழ் பாட்டையும் நாங்கள் ஒரு ஆங்கிலேய இசை கான்சர்ட்ல நாங்கள் விஷயாடி அங்க ஒரு 1000 பேர் இருந்து அதை கேட்டார்கள். அவர்களுக்கு அந்த மொழியை பற்றியே அது கவலை இல்லை. அவர்கள் இசையால் அந்த நாங்கள் அந்த மொழியை கொண்டு சேர்த்தோம். அப்படித்தான் என்னுடைய way of approaching. Yes. Hope I answered.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so for your wonderful word. Next, we have Kyle Vili Rajasekharan, who is a lawyer and also the founder and chairperson of Muttamil Palli in South Australia. Kyle, let's hear you now.
Kyle, mute letthinga.
Please unmute.
Kyle, I think you're on mute.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். தமிழுக்கும் அமுதென்று பேர், அந்த தமிழ் இன்பத் தமிழ் எங்கள் உயிருக்கு நேர். இன்று சிறப்பாக நடந்து கொண்டிருக்கும் இந்த பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் கருத்தரங்கத்தில் நானும் பங்கு பெற முடிந்ததற்கு நான் பெரும் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறேன். இதை ஒருங்கிணைத்து சிறப்பாக நடத்தி கொண்டிருக்கும் அனைத்து தமிழ் சான்றோர்களுக்கும் என் அன்பும் வணக்கங்களும். திருக்குறளும் பன்முக கலாச்சாரமும், திருக்குறள் அண்ட் மல்டிகல்ச்சரலிசம், அந்த தலைப்பில் தான் நாம் கலந்துரையாட வேண்டும் என்று கூறப்பட்டிருக்கிறோம். இங்கிலீஷ்லயும் பேசலாம் அப்படின்னு எங்களுக்கு ஒரு லெவி கொடுத்திருக்காங்க. So I'll just go over a few topics which we are undergoing in a multicultural society like Australia. Australia is a multicultural society of many races, cultures, and beliefs. The country is built by people from a rich variety of cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and religious backgrounds. In a multicultural society like Australia, learning to live with peace and love, as elucidated by Thirukkural in the part entitled Virtue, is fundamentally necessary for people to live in harmony and peace. If people are able to live in peace and harmony within themselves and with their own family, friends, and community, then social peace and harmony will naturally follow. So I'll just see it as an individual person, if you are peace with yourself, and naturally you will have a peaceful family and peaceful friends around you. So the society with individual people with peace, with their family and friends, will constitute a peaceful and harmonious society. So when we look at it, Thiruvalluvar has given us many couplets to teach us how to be with peace and harmony within ourselves and with our family and friends. So I'll just quote a few Thirukkural and elucidate that. Anbudaimai iniyavai kural. Possession of love and speaking sweetly are the two important moral aspects Thiruvalluvar is teaching us to be with peace and harmony with ourselves and with our family and friends. Anbilar ellam tamakuriyar, anbudayar enbum uriyar pirarku. The loveless grab all for themselves, the loving give even their bones. Anbu eenum arvamudaimai, adu eenum nanbu enum nada chirappu. Love begets a life of love for others, and amity of excellence it yields. Anbin valiyadu uirnilai agdilarku enbu tol portha udambu. The soul of life is only within humans. Sans love man's body is but skin and bones. 10 திருக்குறள்களை அன்புடைமைக்காக கொடுத்த திருவள்ளுவர், அன்போடு இருப்பவர்கள் மட்டும்தான் உயிரோடு இருப்பவர்கள், அன்பு இல்லாதவர்கள் வெறும் எலும்பும் தோலும் போன்றவர்கள் என்று கூறுகிறார். So possessing love and speaking sweetly will make peace and harmony in a society, whether it is a multicultural society or a homogeneous society. So when it comes to speaking sweetly, அகன் அமர்ந்து ஈதலின் நன்றே முகன் அமர்ந்து இன்சொலன் ஆகப் பெறின். Kind words with a smiling face are better than gifts of grace. இன்சொலன் இனிதீன்றல் காண்பான் எவன் கொலோ வன்சொல் வழங்குவது. Knowing well the pleasure of sweet words, why cast bitter ones at others? இனிய உளவாக இன்னாத கூறல் கனி இருப்ப காய் கவர்ந்தற்று. Using bitter words instead of pleasant words is like preferring unripe fruits to ripe ones. I just want to connect these two chapters in a multicultural society like Australia. So when you look at the problems in a multicultural society like Australia, like even in schools, in working places, and in the society broadly, racism and bullying are the basic problems the multicultural community faces when they are mingling with people with different race and culture. So when we look at it, when we follow Thirukkural and when we are with love and when we are trying to speak sweetly with others, then the basic problems of a multicultural society like racism and bullying will be gone. So no matter who we are talking to, no matter who we are communicating with, so if we are having the lovely words and if we are speaking with sweet words with each other, then there will not be bullying and racism. அன்புடையவர்களாகவும் இனிய சொல்லை கூறுபவர்களாகவும் இருக்கும் சமூகத்தில் ஒருவரை ஒருவர் மதிப்பிழந்து பேசி புல்லிங் பண்ணுவதற்கோ அல்லது ஒருவருடைய இனத்தையும் ஒருவருடைய தோலின் நிறத்தையும் காட்டி அவர்களை குறைவாக பேசுவதற்கோ there will not be any chance of doing that. So I just feel like possession of love and speaking sweetly should be taught to all the children from their childhood, so that they can grow as good human beings and they can be good citizens of a multicultural society, embracing different people, different culture, different religion, and different races. And when you look at a broader concept of multicultural society, and the problems faced by Australia are the inhumane treatment of refugees, the discrimination of Aboriginal people, the exploitation of natural resources, and climate change. So I'm just looking and I'm just seeking help from Thirukkural and Thiruvalluvar for a multicultural society, a country like Australia, to find solutions for the problems which we are facing in today's context. So I'm just overwhelmed and happy to see that even though the text was written 2000 years ago, the text is helping us, and Thiruvalluvar is very progressive to answer our questions and problems which are existing in our society today. So I'll just quote a few Thirukkurals. For the protection of the rights of refugees and Aboriginal people, that would be the priority for the government and policymakers in Australia if the virtues of Thirukkural were adopted by politicians and those in positions of power. Thiruvalluvar gives a couplet for us. The couplet number is 564. Our king is cruel. When subjects complain, his life and wealth shall swiftly decline. Kural 564. இறைக்கடியன் என்றுரைக்கும் இன்னா சொல்வேந்தன் உரை கடுகி ஒல்லை கெடும். I just want to connect this Thirukkural to the context. If the people are treated inhumanely, like how refugees are treated inhumanely and how Aboriginal people are discriminated here. So if the politicians and the people in power adhere to this couplet, so they will make sure that the people will not say them, like Thiruvalluvar is saying, if the people say our king is cruel, then the king may not be able to get into the power next time. So he's saying his life and wealth swiftly decline. So in our present context, like we don't have kings, so we have democratically elected governments with prime ministers and premiers. So if they follow this, and if the people in their society are not saying our king is cruel, then their wealth and life will not swiftly decline. And when it comes to the exploitation of natural resources and climate change, I just look back to Thirukkural again, and Thiruvalluvar has given the second chapter as the answers for this exploitation of natural resources and climate change. I will refer to Thirukkural, the couplet number 20. Without water, life cannot sustain, nor can virtue without rain. நீரின்று அமையாது உலகெனின் யார் யார்க்கும் வானின்று அமையாது ஒழுக்கு. திருவள்ளுவர் கடவுள் வாழ்த்துக்கு அடுத்த அதிகாரமாக நீரின் பெருமையை குறிக்கிற அதிகாரத்தை வைத்திருக்கிறார். And he has explained that without water, life cannot sustain, nor can virtue without rain. நீரின்று அமையாது உலகெனின் யாரார்க்கும் வானின்று அமையாது ஒழுக்கு என்று அங்கு மிகுந்த he is giving more importance to water and how we need to preserve water and natural resources to have a peaceful and virtuous country. And he's also giving another couplet in 742. Clear water, open land, mountains, and forests with cool shade form a good fortress. குறள் 742. மணி நீரும் மண்ணும் மலையும் அணி நிழற் காடும் உடையது அரண். இந்த இரண்டு குறள்களிலும் திருவள்ளுவர் நீரின் முக்கியத்துவத்தையும் நேச்சுரல் ரிசோர்சஸை ஏன் நாம் பாதுகாக்க வேண்டும் என்ற முக்கியத்துவத்தையும் கொடுக்கிறார். 2000 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு முன்பாகவே எழுதப்பட்டிருந்தாலும் எவ்வாறு இன்று கிளைமேட் சேஞ்ச் ஒரு பெரிய இஷ்யூவா நம்ம பேசிட்டு இருக்கோமோ அதை 2000 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு முன்பே அவர் ஒரு ஞானியை போல கண்டறிந்து நீங்கள் நீரை பாதுகாக்க வேண்டும், மணி நீரையும் மண்ணையும் மலையும் அணி நிழற் காடையும் கொண்ட நல்ல அரணாக இருந்தால்தான் அது ஒரு நல்ல நாடாக இருக்க முடியும் என்று கூறுவது மிகவும் ஆச்சரியத்திற்குரிய விஷயம்தான். So even in today's context, in a multicultural country like Australia, the problems of today's individual life like racism and bullying, and problems of a broader government administration like how to treat refugees, how to treat Aboriginal people, and how to preserve natural resources, and how to be conscious about climate change are being dealt with texts written 2000 years ago in our language. வள்ளுவன் தன்னை உலகினுக்கே தந்து வான் புகழ் கொண்ட தமிழ்நாடு என்று அதனால் தான் பாரதி நம்ம எல்லாம் பெருமை கொள்ள சொல்லியிருக்கிறார் என்று நான் கருதுகிறேன். As everyone has already mentioned, Thirukkural is a universal literature. It transcends all barriers, language, nationality, culture, religion, and it stands for all the time. It stands for yesterday, today, and future. Even after 2000 years, our children and our grandchildren can look back to Thirukkural and find solutions for them, for their problems they face in their day-to-day lives. So உலக பொதுமறை என்று எல்லோராலும் அழைக்கப்படும் திருக்குறளை நாம் இதை ஆக்குவதற்குரிய முயற்சிகள் சீக்கிரமாக வெற்றி அடைய வாழ்த்துகிறேன். இதோடு என்னுடைய உரையை முடிக்கிறேன். Back to Durga. Thank you.
Nandri Kyle, thank you very much for such a thought-provoking speech talking about some of the very current and present issues that we're facing in Australia, in our Australian society and fabric of Australia, talking about climate change and Indigenous issues, as well as issues to do with refugees and the rights of stateless people. I thank you for such an in-depth analysis of how the Thirukkural really applies to today's problems in our country and at the world at large. I'm sure that your students in the school that you have founded, the Tamil school, Muttamil Palli in South Australia, are very fortunate to have you there and teaching them these things. We are so grateful to be here at this conference, and some of you on your YouTube comments are reflecting on the fact that this conference is bilingual, that we are mixing Tamil and English together as we speak, and our speakers are doing the same. And I think that's really important because we have amongst us non-native Tamil speakers who are learning the Thirukkural, who are understanding this. And it is very important for us to take this knowledge that we have of the Thirukkural and how it applies to everyday life to those non-native Tamil speakers amongst us. And that is why the International Thirukkural Foundation and Dr. Parasuraman in particular thinks it's important that we have these conferences across the world so that not only native Tamil speakers who can speak Tamil and some of you might be critiquing my own pronunciation of Tamil, but it is important for us, the students, to understand and learn from it. So we thank you, Kyle, for taking the time to give this speech in Tamil and English so we can understand it so clearly. Next, we have Dr. Vasagi Sitrasenan, who is a medical practitioner in emergency medicine and an ambassador of peace, joining us to speak to us about the Thirukkural. And she's also the president of the Queensland Tamil Mandram, and that is an important aspect to note. So, Dr. Vasagi, to you. Dr. Vasugi, can you hear us?
கேக்குதா? Can you hear
கேக்குது.
me now?
வணக்கம் டாக்டர் வாசுகி.
வணக்கம். Thank you, Durga. இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு அழகிய அர்த்தமுள்ள மகாநாட்டில் ஜூம் இணையவழி மகாநாட்டில் எனது கருத்துக்களையும் பகிர்ந்து கொள்ள கொடுத்த வாய்ப்பிற்காக திருமதி சந்திரிகா அவர்களுக்கும் மற்றும் மகாநாட்டு ஏற்பாட்டாளர்கள் அனைவருக்கும் மனமார்ந்த நன்றிகள். I'm going to talk in English first and later maybe do a little Tamil translation. Now, world needs peace. And that peace is threatened at the moment because of so many differences. The geopolitical and religious differences have divided the world into many fragments. And the loom of mass destruction is looming over us. And we need to stop this menace. And how can we stop it? We need a really strong, just voice. We need a voice. We have to be a voice which has to be heard, and we have to bring the change. And if you analyze what's happening around us, it will come to the point telling us it's most probably because of the education system. The current education system everywhere is teaching materialistic gains. No one is stressing the value of morals. Now, coming from a medical background, I know there are functional MRI scannings done, and there are researches being done. In one interesting research, they did an 8 weeks period of meditation, and they did some MRI before the meditation period and after the meditation period. And I always like to talk about these seahorses and guard dogs. You must be wondering, why am I talking about seahorses and guard dogs? Well, in the brain, there are so many parts, but one particular part is called hippocampus, which resembles the shape of a seahorse. And then there is another part of the brain, which is called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is like having your own guard dog, which makes you react, which makes you angry over certain things, which doesn't give you self-control. Whereas hippocampus is the part which controls your emotions, controls your behavior. Now, when they did this research, they realized in the post-MRI, they found that the density of the hippocampus increased considerably and the amygdala decreased. That shows that moral education can play a vital role in neuroplasticity. By neuroplasticity, I mean the brain is liquid. We can rewire our brain. So if we give moral education to our youngsters, then we can rewire their thinking, not only youngsters, anybody. Now, I consider Thirukkural as the most important tool in this bringing this change. From these vast 133 chapters, and I will go through them. The chapters which I have taken are virtue, impartiality, truthfulness, knowledge, just rule, nation, and emissary. Now, when you approach this in a stepwise ladder-like progression, you will understand that this gives a very clear and progressive scaffold needed to create a peaceful multicultural world consisting of responsible global citizens and peace-willing nations, which will eventually result in having a potent and powerful voice of its own. I'll just take every chapter and give one example of each chapter. Virtue, chapter 4, with its 10 couplets of power of righteousness, defines virtue as a conduct free from envy, greed, and anger and bitter words. It highlights the importance and glory of righteousness throughout life. It guides mankind not to be vicious, but to be virtuous, which is the true pleasure of life. Couplet 34. To be of pure, spotless mind is real virtue. All else is of no avail. How true it is. And then we move on to impartiality. Impartiality is needed for a non-biased approach in life. The biased approach is the root cause for many problems. Now, I would like to quote couplet 118, which says, like scales that always remain just and fair, wise men remain impartial and do not take sides. So be righteousness and then be non-partial. Then we move on to truthfulness. Truthfulness is very well prioritized in Thirukkural. It advocates it as the best virtue one could possess. And I would like to quote couplet 294, which states, if a man or woman could conduct himself or herself true to their inner self, they would be in the heart of all in the world. How true that is. Now we move on to knowledge. Thiruvalluvar calls the wise men as universal friends. He calls them universal friends who live in conformity with the world. And chapter 43 elaborates the richness of wise men and how they use their wisdom as the inner fortress to baffle the enemy's entry. And I would also like to quote couplet 425, which says, the wise are equal-minded, universal friends, and their friendship remains solid and stable, regardless of favorable or unfavorable circumstances. Now, this is all individual and friends. And then we move on to governments. Thiruvalluvar is stressing the importance of just rule. Chapter 55 clearly stresses the importance of just rule, and that is well said in this couplet, which is couplet 546. It is not spear that wins, but scepter, and that too when not deflected. Then we'll move on to nation. He defines the good qualities needed for an ideal country. Chapter 74 on nation it's an eye-opener for today's world, especially for the developing countries. The 10 couplets of this chapter state that country with good rains, yielding crops, wise men, and strong defense make an ideal country, which is further beautified by blooming health and happiness of the subjects. And couplet 734 states, what makes a great nation is its freedom from famine, incurable diseases, and dangerous enemies. How appropriate it is in the current pandemic state. Again, it's freedom from famine, incurable diseases, and dangerous enemies. Then we move on to emissary, which is needed for a networking between the nations. Chapter 69 was chosen as the ultimate chapter, in my view, because it stresses the importance of ambassadors to weave a beautiful tapestry of an ideal multicultural world. And he defines the qualities which are needed for an ambassador. An ambassador should have 3 necessary qualities: love for the leader, political genius, and learned eloquence to present facts. Now, considering all these highly moral teaching from Thirukkural, I think we need to educate our young kids, not only the Tamil kids, growing minds, any growing minds, with Thirukkural couplets. And being the current president of Queensland Tamil Mandram, we have launched a project called Kural with QTM, where we encourage kids to learn one Kural, deliver and tell the explanation. We strongly and firmly believe this seeds the righteous thoughts in their young minds for them to grow into responsible global citizens. I consider Thirukkural as a very strong tool in paving the way to a multicultural world. That's my stance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vasuki Chitrasenan, for your wonderful speech. You spoke from a perspective of peace and as a peace ambassador, and why we should learn from the Thirukkural considering the current global pandemic As a medical practitioner, how do you see us, and somebody who is spearheading this project of a Kural through children, how do you see us taking the Thirukkural to our future generations?
Well, first, few things. First, we have to teach. I would like to tell an example. Now, a few years ago, there is an organization, Sydney-based organization called Australian Tamil Graduates. They conduct competitions every year. So, as part of the competition, kids are encouraged to recite Thirukkural. And my kids never learned Thirukkural because, we migrated. Like, we did tell them about Thirukkural, but we didn't teach them. But because of the competition, I can still remember a day. It was a lovely sunny day in the Sunshine State of Queensland. I was having my kids, they were aged about 10 and 12. So I was teaching them Thirukkural, and they were asking questions. They were really amazed at the visionary ways Thirukkural had. And even still, if I ask my kids, the only Thirukkural they can say then and there is Katka Kasadara Katravi Katpavi Nitka Adatkuttaha. I think that Thirukkural, if anybody learns it, will tell them what to say. Will tell them the importance of Thirukkural in having a proper life, and that how to say that we have to encourage the kids to learn the Thirukkural, to know all these values.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vasuki, for that. Thank you also to Yaso Ponuthurai, Councillor of the City of Canning, Kayalvili Rajasekharan, the chairperson of Muttamil Palli, and again, thank you, Dr. Vasuki, who is the president of the Queensland Tamil Mandram. Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam and I spoke about how we could bring Thiruvalluvar in closest physical form as possible in Australia after the international conference last year. And we have taken steps to bring Thiruvalluvar and a statue of Thiruvalluvar at the University of Western Sydney, where I am an academic. And we are very pleased to say that the university is considering such a measure and is very excited about such a measure, leading to hopefully a Tamil chair in the future at the University of Western Sydney. These are projects that require an international support from all of you to bring this Thirukkural and Thiruvalluvar here to Australia. As Kayalvili was speaking earlier, and her being a scholar of Aboriginal studies and the law, and the interest she has in understanding Aboriginal studies along with Tamil, and the relationship between the Aboriginal people and the Tamil people are important. And here I speak of the Australian Aboriginal and Indigenous communities. So there's important work happening here in Australia. And we thank you, Australian Tamil scholars and academics, for your work in bringing this wonderful literature here to Australia. I'd also like to finish by thanking the Australian chapter of the Thirukkural Foundation, Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, and also Dr. Parasuraman at SRM University, and Dr. Jay Ganesh, who is an absolute champion academic of bringing Tamil and the excitement of Tamil to the younger generations. And if you've ever heard Dr. Jay Ganesh speak and teach, you will also be inspired to learn Tamil. And I'd like to thank you all for your contribution in bringing this conference forward. And I now pass on to you, Chandrika.
Thank you very much, Durga, for doing a wonderful job as usual. And all the Durga's angels, Charlie's angels, Kayalvili, Vasugi, and Yasoda for doing a wonderful job by contributing a lot about various aspects of Thirukkural and multiculturalism. It's thought-provoking, and people could pick up things. There are various aspects you can look into the modern world of life where Thirukkural can be applicable. Thank you very much for that. There are two more items. One is a musical piece somebody is singing while a violinist is playing. And also the last item is vote of thanks. Before that, I missed out my first part of the speech, which is the concept paper of the conference. Let me start and finish it in very quick way. கதிர் வெடித்து பிளம்பு விழ கடல் குதித்து சூடாற்ற முதுமை மிகு நிலப்பரப்பின் முதற் பிறப்பு தோன்றிவிட நதி வருமுன் மணல் தருமுன் நலம் வளர்த்த தமிழனங்கே பதிமதுரை பெருவழியில் பாண்டியர்க்கை பார்த்தவளே நின்னை யான் வணங்குவதும் நீ என்னை வாழ்த்துவதும் அன்னை மகற்கிடையே அழகில்லை என்பதனால் உன்னை வளர்த்து வரும் ஓன் புகழ் தேர் தன் புலவர் தன்னை வணங்குகின்றேன் தமிழ் புலவர் வாழியவே. இன்று திருவள்ளுவரை கொண்டாடி கொண்டிருக்கின்றோம். உலகின் மிகப்பெரிய புலவன் அவன். 2 ஈரடியில் மூவுலகையும் அளந்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றான். அன்றில்ல இன்றல்ல என்றென்றும் அவன் அளக்கப் போகின்றவன். அத்தகைய ஒரு பெருமை மிக்க ஒரு புலவனை நாம் போற்றுவதால் தமிழை போற்றுகிறோம் என்று சொல்லி I am now reading my concept paper of this conference. Following the very successful International Thirukkural Conference organized jointly by Tamil Valarchi Mandram and the International Thirukkural Foundation Mauritius in 2019 in Sydney University in association with Sydney University, Institute of Asian Studies and Shramaya Foundation, we decided to continue the chain of conferences this year too without breaking it. I will later present my concept paper with other details, but I'll just give you the underpinning theme of last year's conference was Thirukkural and Peace and Harmony, whereas we decided to organize this conference as a second part of it in exploring Thirukkural and multiculturalism, with an aim to emphasize the universal nature of Thirukkural to identify it as a universal literature. Australia being a multicultural country, the theme is appropriate. I could not think anyone else other than our own Ms. Yori Mckay, MP, leader of the opposition in New South Wales and Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, whom we missed in our last conference, but we caught her today. Thank you, Ms. Yori Mckay, for being with us with your ever-smiling face and your beautiful sari, agreeing to deliver a speech today on Thirukkural and multiculturalism. Professor Arumugham Parasuraman, President of the International Thirukkural Foundation, is also with us today, who's readily encouraged me to organize this conference to unleash the potential of ancient literature, Thirukkural, as a book of the world. The conference seeks to create an interface between the ancient literature and modern world. It also targets to promote universal harmony through literature by providing universal learning opportunity and strategies of integrating ancient literature into modern lifestyle, while aiming to educate young generations towards the importance of harmonious living in a diversified societies and communities. The target audience for the conference includes, but not limited to, international participants from various areas like education institutes, students, academics, experts, researchers, sociologists, linguists, and anthropologists, opinion leaders as well. Theme and sub-theme. Under the core theme of Thirukkural and multiculturalism, the sub-themes can include peace, harmony, ethics, and universal brotherhood. Schedule of events. It is scheduled for 5 days. Today is the inaugural, and we will be having a concluding valedictory day. In between, we will be having 3 days with 6 speakers from eminent Tamil research areas. Will be delivering 6 different titles for us to know the in-depth logic of Thirukkural. And we also had a group discussion today, and there'll be one on the last day where young people will be talking on Thirukkural and youth. Mr. Tirunanda Kumar will be heading that and chairing that session. And we have 2 young girls who will be talking about Thirukkural and multiculturalism. Other than that, we have some 2 dance programs and a violin program. The 6 scholars exploring various aspects of Thirukkural are Dr. Arimalam Padmanathan, Thirukkural and Music, Mr. Kumanarasan on Thirukkural and Feminism, Dr. Professor V. Renuga Devi on Thirukkural and Style, Dr. Valli on Thirukkural and Friendship, Dr. Kurinji Vendan on background aspects of formation of Thirukkural, Dr. Vijayarani concepts aspects of Thirukkural. So with that, we will be concluding after three days of this continuous chain of conference events. And I also thank all of you who could be here today with us, support us, and make us to do that. In particular to Dr. Parashuraman, my thanks goes. When we discussed this, he immediately said, please go ahead and do. And the second thing, when I was discussing with Dr. Jay Ganesh, he said, can we do it together? And it happened at 11:30 in the night. And I said, yes. And he said, can you send me a letter? 11:45, I sent a letter. At 12 o'clock, he got the signature from SRM Pro Chancellor, and it all sparked up. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Now, may I request the organizers of the technology to get the violin music of Agalya Pavalan. Thank you. Violin music, please.
யார் பண்றாங்கம்மா வயலின் மியூசிக்?
சுரேஷ்
சுரேஷ் சார்.
You can hear it on YouTube. YouTubeல போயிட்டு இருக்கு. எங்களுக்கு தான் தெரியல. So don't worry.
Okay, all right.
Chandrika, can you unmute?
Finished? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Agalya Pavalan, for rendering such a beautiful music for us. Now we are coming close to the end of the program. Vote of thanks. Before Dr. Jay Ganesh, Secretary, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Tamil Perayam, give his vote of thanks. Let me thank him for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And he and myself have been working for the last 8 weeks, sitting and organizing. It's only 2 people who were working on this project. Up to midnight, we used to work. Every 5 minutes, we exchange messages. And he could gather today more than 1,000 people to register for this program. It is a sole effort. He could do that. And we have 2,000 children who have done their Thirukkural, reciting one Kural and its meaning. We received 2,000 children and their applications. We will be telecasting those after they get the permission from their parents to show them up on media. And the whole credit goes to Mr. Dr. Jay Ganesh, because he just asked me, and within 15 minutes I said yes, but we had to wait for Dr. Parasuraman to approve it. That took, because he was in a function, and after 1 hour he agreed, and everything went on very well. I really appreciate Dr. Jay Ganesh for all your effort. On behalf of Tamil Valarchi Mandram, Thirukkural Foundation, and all the audience, I thank you for all your efforts. And now may I request you to give a proper vote of thanks to the audience. Thank you.
மிக்க நன்றி அம்மா. இருந்தமிழை உன்னால் இருந்தேன், இமையோர்தம் விருந்தமிழ்தம் என்றாலும் வேண்டேன் என்றார் தமிழ் விடுதூதின் ஆசிரியர். தாய் தமிழை உன்னை வணங்கி என் நன்றியுரையை தொடங்குகிறேன். மொரீஷியஸ் பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் அமைப்பும் SRM தமிழ் பேராயமும் இணைந்து ஒருங்கிணைக்கக்கூடிய இந்த பன்னாட்டு திருக்குறள் கருத்தரங்கிற்கு வருகை தந்துள்ள அனைவருக்கும் என் நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை முதலில் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். திருக்குறள் பல்லின கலாச்சாரம் என்னும் தலைப்பிலான இந்த இணையவழி மாநாட்டை நாங்கள் ஒருங்கிணைக்க முதற் காரணமாய் இருந்த மொரீஷியஸ் திருக்குறள் பன்னாட்டு அமைப்பிற்கும் SRM தமிழ் பேராயத்தின் புரவலர் மற்றும் பெரம்பலூர் நாடாளுமன்ற உறுப்பினர் SRM கல்விக் குழும நிறுவனவேந்தர் மாண்பமை வேந்தர் அவர்களுக்கும் இந்த நேரத்தில் எங்களுடைய நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்வதில் நாங்கள் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். இந்த கருத்தரங்கை ஏற்பாடு செய்து அதன் இயக்குநராகவும் இருந்து இரவு பகல் பாராமல் அயராமல் உழைத்து மிகச்சிறப்பாக செயல்பட்டு வரக்கூடியவர் எங்கள் மதிப்பிற்குரிய போற்றுதலுக்குரிய முனைவர் சந்திரிகா சுப்பிரமணியன் அம்மையார் அவர்கள். அவர்கள் இந்த கருத்தரங்கில் மிகச்சிறப்பானதொரு அறிமுக உரையை வழங்கி இந்த தொடக்க விழாவை மிகச்சிறப்பாக அவர்கள் தொடங்கி வைத்தார்கள். அவர்களுக்கு இந்த நேரத்தில் எங்களுடைய சார்பாக நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். முதலில் தொடக்க விழா சிறப்புரை வழங்கிய திருக்குறள் பன்னாட்டு அமைப்பின் தலைவர், இந்த கருத்தரங்கின் பின்னால் இருந்து அதை இயக்கக்கூடியவர், இந்த கருத்தரங்கம் சிறப்புற நடைபெற தமது முழு ஆதரவையும் நல்கிய பேராசிரியர் பரசுராமன் ஐயா அவர்களுக்கு எங்களுடைய நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவிப்பதில் நாங்கள் மட்டற்ற மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். மொரிஷியஸ் திருக்குறள் பன்னாட்டு அமைப்புடன் SRM தமிழ் பேராயம் இவ்வாறு இணைந்து செயல்பட எல்லா நிலைகளிலும் எங்களுக்கு வழிகாட்டியாய் நின்று செயல்படுவதோடு, இந்த தொடக்க விழாவில் தொடக்க உரையை என் வழி வழங்கி சிறப்பித்த SRM கல்வி நிறுவனத்தின் இணைத்துணை வேந்தரும் மற்றும் SRM தமிழ் பேராயத்தின் தலைவருமான முனைவர் இரா பாலசுப்ரமணியன் ஐயா அவர்களுக்கு எங்கள் நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். இன்றைய தொடக்க விழாவில் வாழ்த்துரை வழங்கிய திருக்குறள் தமிழ் வளர்ச்சி மன்றம் புலவர் டாக்டர் மனோமோகன் அவர்களுக்கும், திருக்குறள் தமிழ் வளர்ச்சி மன்றத்தின் ஸ்ரீ பொன்னையா பிள்ளை அவர்களுக்கும் இந்த நேரத்தில் எங்களுடைய நன்றியை தெரிவிப்பதில் மற்றற்ற மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். இன்றைய தொடக்க விழாவின் மையமாக இருந்து சிறப்பு வழங்கிய எதிர்க்கட்சி தலைவர் மற்றும் நிழல் பல்லின கலாச்சாரத்துறை அமைச்சர் மதிப்பிற்குரிய ஜோடி மெக்கே அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றி தெரிவிப்பதில் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். இந்த கருத்தரங்கில் கலந்து கொண்டு மிகச் சிறப்பானதோர் கலந்துரையாடலுக்கு தமது தலைமையை வழங்கிய ஆசியவியல் நிறுவன இயக்குனர் மற்றும் செயலர் முனைவர் ஜான்சமோயில் ஐயா அவர்களுக்கு எங்களுடைய நன்றியை தெரிவிப்பதில் மட்டற்ற மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். ஐயாவோடு உடனிருந்து இந்த கலந்துரையாடலை ஒருங்கிணைத்த செல்வி துர்கா ஓவன் அவர்களுக்கும் மற்றும் இந்த கருத்தரங்கில் கலந்து கொண்ட செல்வி கயல்விழி ராஜசேகர் மற்றும் செல்வி வாசுகி சித்திரசேனன் மற்றும் யசோதா பொன்னுத்துறை அம்மையார் அவர்களுக்கும் அனைவருக்கும் இந்த நேரத்தில் எங்களுடைய நன்றியை தெரிவிப்பதில் நாங்கள் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். இந்த தொடக்க விழாவில் நிறைவாக சிறப்பானதொரு வயலின் இசை நம் காதுகளை குளிர வைத்த செல்வி அகல்யா பாவலன் அவர்களுக்கு நாங்கள் நன்றி தெரிவிப்பதோடு, உடனிருந்த இசையை அழகூட்டிய அவர்களுக்கும் நாங்கள் எங்கள் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். இணையம் இந்த தொடக்கம் சில சிக்கல்கள் இருந்த போதிலும், ஆனால் நிறைவு என்பது மனநிறைவாகவே நமக்கு இருந்துவிட்டது. இந்த மனநிறைவை இவ்வாறு வழங்குவதற்கு எல்லா நிலைகளிலும் ஒத்துழைப்பு வழங்கிய, இதனை மிக சிறப்பாக ஒளிபரப்பு செய்த ஆசி தமிழ் முரசு யூடியூப் சேனலுக்கும் நண்பர் சுரேஷ் அவர்களுக்கும் இந்த நேரத்தில் நாங்கள் நன்றியை தெரிவிப்பதில் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். அது மட்டுமல்லாமல் நாளை தொடங்கி நிறைவு விழா வரை எங்களோடு இணைந்திருக்கக்கூடிய அறிஞர் பெருமக்களுக்கும், இங்கே இணைந்திருக்கக்கூடிய அறிஞர் பெருமக்களுக்கும் மற்றும் இந்த நிகழ்வு சிறப்புற உலகெங்கிலும் இருந்து பல்வேறு நாடுகளிலிருந்து இணைந்திருக்கக்கூடிய இந்த திருக்குறளுக்காக தமிழுக்காக தம்மை அர்ப்பணிக்கக்கூடிய அத்தனை தமிழ் உள்ளங்களுக்கும் இந்த பங்கேற்பாளர்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய இந்த திருக்குறள் பன்னாட்டு மாநாடு சார்பாக நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். யாரேனும் தவறவிட்டிருந்தால் அவர்களையும் இணைத்து எனது நன்றியை உங்களுக்கு உரித்தாக்குகிறேன். அனைவருக்கும் நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
நிறைவாக அடுத்து 3 நாட்களும் எங்களுடன் இணைந்திருங்கள். தமிழில் திருக்குறளை பற்றி 6 அறிஞர்கள் பேசுகின்றார்கள், 2 இளைஞர்கள் பேசுகின்றார்கள். இறுதி நாளில் ஒரு கருத்தரங்கு கலந்துரையாடல் இருக்கின்றது. எல்லோரும் எங்களுடன் இணைந்திருங்கள், எங்களுக்கு உங்கள் ஊக்கத்தை தாருங்கள். அடுத்த வருடமும் நாங்கள் இந்த திருவள்ளுவர் விழாவை நடத்துவோம். சிறுவர்களுக்கு இன்னும் போட்டிகளை அறிவித்து பரிசுகளையும் வழங்குவதற்கு தீர்மானித்திருக்கின்றோம். ஆண்டுதோறும் இந்த திருக்குறள் மாநாடு நடக்கும் என்பதை சொல்லிக்கொண்டு உங்களிடமிருந்து நான் விடைபெறுகின்றேன். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
அனைவருக்கும் நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
Hello, welcome back to District Community. Today we're at Kangaroo Valley and going to be trying some food at the Friendly Inn. As you guys see, the clouds have come down. It's a beautiful view. Kangaroo Valley is around 150 kilometers from Sydney.